The dust from the stagecoach still hung in the air when Katherine Thorne stumbled onto the wooden sidewalk of Fairplay, Colorado, with nothing but a threadbare carpet bag and bruises hidden beneath her long sleeves that told stories she refused to speak aloud. She had ridden 3 days straight from Denver, her savings depleted, her stomach empty, and her heart even emptier after fleeing a marriage that had nearly killed her spirit and very nearly her body too. The year was 1878, and women alone in mining towns were viewed with suspicion at best and outright contempt at worst, especially women who arrived with nothing and no one to vouch for their character. The Rocky Mountains loomed around Fairplay like ancient sentinels, their peaks still crowned with snow even though it was late May. The town itself sat at over 9,000 feet elevation in South Park, a broad valley that miners had descended upon like locusts after gold was discovered in the surrounding streams. Katherine pulled her shawl tighter against the cold mountain air, so different from the stuffy parlor she had escaped in Denver, where her husband had raised his fists one time too many. She had no plan beyond survival. The marriage had left her with nothing. Not even her maiden name felt truly hers anymore, though she clung to it fiercely. Her father had disowned her for marrying against his wishes 3 years ago, and her mother had died when Katherine was just 15. At 23, she was starting over completely, and the weight of that reality pressed on her shoulders heavier than any physical burden. The main street of Fairplay stretched before her, lined with false-fronted buildings that promised more grandeur than they delivered. A general store, a blacksmith, several saloons, a hotel that looked barely habitable, and a restaurant with a hand-painted sign that read Mabel's Kitchen. Katherine's stomach growled audibly. She had eaten nothing but hardtack for 2 days. She pushed open the door to Mabel's Kitchen, and every head in the place turned to stare. There were maybe a dozen men scattered at various tables, all of them covered in the grime of hard labor, all of them studying her with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. A large woman with graying hair tied back in a severe bun emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "We do not serve women of questionable character," the woman said flatly before Katherine could even open her mouth. "I am not a woman of questionable character," Katherine replied, keeping her voice steady despite the flush of humiliation creeping up her neck. "I am a woman looking for work and willing to pay for a meal." "Work?" One of the men laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Ain't but one kind of work for a woman shows up alone in a mining town." Katherine's jaw tightened. She had expected this, but expectation did not make it easier to bear. "I can cook, clean, do laundry, mend clothes, keep books. I can read and write and do figures. I am not afraid of hard work." Mabel's expression did not soften. "Even if I believed you, which I do not, I already got all the help I need. Try somewhere else." But everywhere else proved the same. The hotel manager looked her up and down and quoted a price for a room that was 3 times what she knew it should be, clearly trying to drive her away. The general store owner refused to speak to her at all, just pointed at the door when she asked about employment. By the time the sun began to sink behind the mountains, Katherine was fighting back tears of frustration and fear. She found herself at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scattered tents and rough cabins that housed the miners who could not afford better. Her money would last maybe 3 more days if she was careful, less if she actually wanted to eat. The thought of returning to Denver, of crawling back to her father or worse, her husband, made her physically ill. "You look lost." Katherine spun around to find a man standing a few feet away, leading a dappled gray horse by the reins. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of hazel, green and gold mixed together like the aspen leaves in autumn. His clothes marked him as a cowboy rather than a miner, wearing worn denim pants, scuffed boots, a leather vest over a blue cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the dying sun. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, and there was a gentleness in his expression that Katherine had not seen from any other man in this town. "I am fine," she said automatically, though it was obviously a lie. "Name's Kieran Ashford," he said, making no move to come closer, as if he understood she might spook like a nervous horse. "I work a ranch about 5 miles west of here, up in the valley. Couldn't help but notice you have been asking around for work." "And you heard everyone refuse me," Katherine said bitterly. "So if you have come to offer me the kind of work those men suggested, you can save your breath." To her surprise, Kieran's face flushed with what looked like genuine embarrassment. "No, madam, nothing like that. I was thinking, well, my boss's wife passed last winter, and he has been struggling to keep house and care for his 2 young ones while managing the ranch. He mentioned just yesterday he wished he could find someone respectable to help out. I thought maybe, if you were interested, I could introduce you." Katherine studied him carefully, looking for the trap, the catch, the ulterior motive. But his eyes were steady and honest, and there was something in the set of his shoulders that suggested he was uncomfortable with the conversation but determined to have it anyway. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not know anything about me." "I know the whole town has judged you without knowing a single thing about you either," Kieran said quietly. "That does not sit right with me, and I know what it is like to be alone in the world with no one willing to give you a chance." He paused, then added, "My offer is genuine, no strings attached. If you are interested, I will ride back to the ranch tonight and speak to Mr. Patterson. If he is agreeable, I can fetch you in the morning. If not, or if you would rather take your chances here in town, that is your choice to make." Katherine wanted to be suspicious, wanted to protect herself from disappointment or worse. But she was also practical enough to know she had few options. "What are the children's ages?" "Boy is 7, girl is 4. Good kids, just missing their mama something fierce." "And this Mr. Patterson, he is an honorable man." "Most honorable man I know," Kieran said without hesitation. "Lost his wife to pneumonia and hasn't been the same since, but he would never harm a woman or allow anyone else to. I give you my word on that." There was something about the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, that made Katherine want to believe him. She realized she was desperately hoping this was real, this small kindness from a stranger. "I am staying at the hotel," she said finally. "Or I will be for a few more nights at least, if I can negotiate a fair price." "The owner is charging you triple, I'd wager," Kieran said with a frown. "Tell him you are a potential employee of the Patterson Ranch, and he should give you the standard rate. Jim Patterson is well respected around here, even if the rest of us ranch hands are just seen as drifters. His name carries weight." "Thank you," Katherine said, and found she meant it sincerely. "I am Katherine Thorne." Kieran touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed old-fashioned even for 1878. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Thorne. I will be by the hotel at first light tomorrow, if you are willing." She watched him lead his horse down the street toward the livery, wondering if she had just been offered a lifeline or had simply found a more polite trap. But when she returned to the hotel and mentioned the Patterson Ranch, the owner's entire demeanor changed. He suddenly became almost obsequious, offering her a clean room at a fair price, and even having his wife bring up a basin of warm water for washing. That night, Katherine lay in an actual bed for the first time in days and allowed herself to hope, just a little, that maybe her luck was finally changing. Kieran arrived exactly at dawn, riding his gray horse and leading a gentle bay mare for Katherine. The morning was crisp and cold, and Katherine's breath misted in the air as she climbed into the saddle with as much dignity as she could muster. She had not ridden much, but she was determined not to show any weakness. They rode west out of Fairplay as the sun painted the mountain peaks pink and gold. Kieran kept the pace easy and did not press her with questions, for which Katherine was grateful. The valley opened up before them, vast and beautiful, with sage brush and wild grasses stretching toward the mountains. A creek ran alongside the trail, swollen with snowmelt, and somewhere in the distance cattle lowed. "It is beautiful here," Katherine said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Yes, madam, it is," Kieran agreed. "Harsh in winter, but I have never seen anywhere prettier come spring and summer. The wildflowers will be blooming soon, cover the whole valley in color." "How long have you worked for Mr. Patterson?" "About 4 years now. Came here after some trouble down in New Mexico, looking for a fresh start. Mr. Patterson gave me a chance when nobody else would, taught me about ranching, treated me fair. I owe him a lot." Katherine heard the echo of her own situation in his words. "What kind of trouble, if you do not mind me asking?" Kieran was quiet for a moment, then said, "The kind where you get blamed for something you did not do because your word does not count for much against a rich man's son. I was 18, working on a ranch outside Santa Fe. The owner's son took a liking to a local girl who did not return his interest. When she turned up hurt, he said he saw me near her place. Wasn't true, but didn't matter. I had to run or hang, simple as that." "I am sorry," Katherine said softly. "It is not right, the way some people can destroy lives without consequence." "No, madam, it isn't. But I have learned that most people are just trying to get by the best they can, and some are downright good if you give them a chance to show it. Mr. Patterson was one of the good ones." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was more substantial than Katherine had expected, with a sturdy 2-story house built from logs, a large barn, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and she could see several other men working near the barn. Smoke rose from the house's chimney, a welcoming sign. A man emerged from the house as they approached, tall and broad-shouldered with dark blonde hair going gray at the temples. He looked to be in his early 40s, with a weathered face and tired eyes that held a deep sadness. 2 children peered out from behind him, the boy serious and watchful, the girl clinging to her brother's hand. "Mr. Patterson, this is Miss Katherine Thorne," Kieran said, dismounting and moving to help Katherine down. "The lady I mentioned." "James Patterson," the man said, offering his hand for a firm shake. "Kieran says you are looking for work and can manage a household." "Yes, sir," Katherine said, standing straight and meeting his eyes. "I can cook, clean, do laundry, mind children, and manage household accounts. I can also read and write well enough to help with correspondence if needed." "Where are you from?" "Denver originally. I am recently widowed and found myself in need of employment." The lie came easier than the truth, and Katherine pushed away the guilt. A widow was respectable in a way a woman who had fled her husband was not. James studied her carefully, and Katherine had the sense he suspected there was more to her story. But he simply nodded and said, "My wife passed this winter. Sarah was the heart of this home, and without her, everything has fallen apart. I can manage the ranch work, but the house, the children, it is more than I can handle alone. I need help, but I need to know the person I bring into my home is trustworthy and will treat my children with kindness." "I understand completely," Katherine said. "I give you my word I will work hard and treat your children as if they were my own family." The little girl tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered something Katherine could not hear. James's expression softened slightly. "My daughter Emma wants to know if you can make apple pie." It was her mother's specialty, and we have not had it since she passed. Katherine smiled at the little girl, whose blue eyes were so hopeful it made her chest ache. I can make apple pie, and if your papa has the ingredients, I would be happy to make one today if you would like. Emma's face lit up, and even the boy, who James introduced as Matthew, looked cautiously interested. The job comes with room and board, plus $20 a month, James said. You would have your own room upstairs, and I expect honesty, hard work, and kindness to my children. In return, I promise you will be treated with respect and fairness. If anyone in town or among my ranch hands bothers you, you come straight to me. This is a respectable position, and I will make sure everyone understands that. I accept, Katherine said, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt lightheaded. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I promise you will not regret this. Call me James when it is just us, he said. And I will call you Katherine if that is acceptable. No need to be formal in our own home. Our home. The words settled over Katherine like a warm blanket. She had a home again, at least for now. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Katherine threw herself into her work with determination, scrubbing the house from top to bottom, organizing the chaos that had accumulated during the months James had tried to manage alone, and slowly winning over the children. Matthew was wary at first, protective of his little sister and still grieving his mother. But when he discovered Katherine could help him with the reading that had been frustrating him, and that she never spoke to him like he was stupid when he struggled with words, he began to warm to her. Emma was easier, desperate for a woman's affection and attention. She followed Katherine everywhere, chattering about her mother, asking questions about Katherine's life, and generally being the kind of sweet, trusting child that made Katherine's heart ache for all the possibilities she had thought lost to her. But it was Kieran who surprised her most. He was a constant presence around the ranch, always respectful but finding small ways to make her life easier. He fixed the pump at the kitchen sink without being asked when he noticed her struggling with it. He brought wildflowers from the meadow and left them on the kitchen windowsill with no explanation. He taught Emma how to whistle and made Matthew laugh with stories about the ranch animals that were probably exaggerated but harmless. And he talked to Katherine like she was a person worth knowing, not just a housekeeper. In the evenings, after the children were in bed and the work was done, Katherine would sometimes sit on the porch to watch the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Kieran often finished his work around the same time, and he would join her, sitting a respectful distance away and talking about everything and nothing. She learned he was 26, originally from Texas, and had been on his own since he was 16 when both his parents died of cholera during an outbreak in San Antonio. He had worked his way north doing whatever jobs he could find, learning to cowboy from other drifters and ranch hands, sending money to his younger sister, who had been taken in by their aunt. You ever see her? Katherine asked one evening as they watched the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Not since I left New Mexico, Kieran admitted. Too risky to go back, and she is married now with children of her own. We write when we can. She knows I didn't do what they said, but knowing and being able to prove it are different things. I am sorry you have been separated from your family. What about you? Kieran asked gently. You said you were widowed, but you never mentioned your husband or any other family. Katherine was quiet for a long moment, debating how much truth to share. Finally, she said, I was not widowed. I lied because the truth would have made finding work impossible. I ran away from my husband because he hurt me, and I finally realized he was never going to stop. My father disowned me when I married against his wishes, so I had nowhere to go and no one to help me. Coming to Fairplay was a desperate gamble, and I thought I had lost until you spoke to me that first day." She waited for judgment, for the questions about why she did not try harder to make her marriage work, for the subtle condemnation that women always seemed to receive when they spoke about such things. But Kieran just nodded slowly and said, "That took a lot of courage. Leaving, I mean. Starting over, I am glad you did. You are not shocked. You do not think I should have stayed and tried to be a better wife. I think any man who raises his hand to a woman is not a man at all," Kieran said firmly. "And I think you did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that." Katherine felt something shift in her chest, a walls crumbling that she had not even realized she had built. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not know what it means to hear someone say that." "You are worth more than how that man treated you," Kieran said, and there was such conviction in his voice that Katherine almost believed him. After that night, something changed between them. The conversations grew longer, more personal. Katherine found herself watching for Kieran during the day, her mood lifting when she caught sight of him working with the horses or riding in from the pastures. She told herself it was just friendship, just gratitude for his kindness. But her heart knew the truth even before her mind would accept it. She was falling in love with Kieran Ashford. The realization terrified her. Her marriage had left scars that went deeper than the physical bruises, and the thought of trusting another man with her heart seemed impossibly foolish. But Kieran was nothing like her husband. Where Marcus had been charming in public and cruel in private, Kieran was simply genuine all the time. Where Marcus had demanded and taken, Kieran offered and gave freely. Where Marcus had made her feel small and worthless, Kieran made her feel seen and valued. June arrived with warm days and cool nights, and the valley exploded with wildflowers just as Kieran had promised. Katherine had settled into the rhythm of ranch life, and even the children had stopped tiptoeing around grief quite so much. Matthew was doing better with his reading and had started following Kieran around, eager to learn about horses and cattle. Emma had declared Katherine her best friend and insisted on helping with every household task, even when her help created more work than it saved. James had also relaxed around Katherine, treating her less like a stranger and more like family. He had even started smiling occasionally, particularly when he came in from a long day to find a hot meal waiting and his children clean and happy. One evening, he pulled Katherine aside and said, "I want you to know how much your presence here has meant to all of us. This house feels like a home again. Thank you." "I am the one who should be thanking you," Katherine replied. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." "Kieran gave you that chance," James corrected with a knowing smile. "I just had the good sense to listen to him." That young man has good judgment, especially about people. Katherine felt her cheeks warm, wondering if her feelings were as obvious as James's comment suggested. A few days later, several of the ranch hands rode into Fairplay for supplies, and Kieran asked if Katherine needed anything from town. She gave him a list of items for the kitchen and watched him ride off with a strange mixture of contentment and longing. He returned late in the afternoon, his expression stormy as he dismounted near the house. Katherine emerged from the kitchen, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. Kieran hesitated, then said, "There is a man in town asking questions about a woman who ran away from Denver. Gave a description that sounds an awful lot like you. Says he is looking for his wife, that she is not well and needs to come home." Katherine's blood turned to ice. "Marcus," she breathed. "He is here. Is that your husband's name?" "Yes, Marcus Thorne. He must have tracked me somehow, or maybe he just guessed I would head to one of the mountain towns where I could disappear." Fear clawed at her throat. "Did he see you?" "Did anyone tell him about me?" "I don't think so. Most folks don't know much about you beyond that you work here, and the ones I talked to didn't seem inclined to help him. But Katherine, if he starts asking around more specifically, someone might put it together. I have to leave, Katherine said, her mind racing. I cannot let him find me. I cannot go back. You are not going anywhere, Kieran said firmly. We will figure this out. You do not understand. He will not just leave. He will cause trouble, maybe even go to the law and claim I stole from him or something equally ridiculous. He has money and connections. I am just a runaway wife with no rights to anything, not even my own freedom. Then we make sure he cannot take you back. Katherine shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. How? The law says a wife belongs to her husband. I have no legal standing to refuse him. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought. Then he said, unless you weren't his wife anymore. Divorce is nearly impossible, especially for a woman, and it takes time I do not have. I wasn't thinking divorce, Kieran said slowly, then took a deep breath and met her eyes. Katherine, I know this is sudden, and I know we have only known each other for about 6 weeks, but I have to say this before I lose my courage. From the moment I saw you that first day in Fairplay, looking so lost but so determined not to show it, I have not been able to get you out of my mind. These past weeks working beside you, talking with you, watching you bring life back to this ranch and those children, I have fallen completely in love with you. Katherine's heart hammered in her chest, unable to process what she was hearing. Kieran continued, his words coming faster now, as if he needed to get them all out before he stopped himself. I know you have every reason not to trust men, not to want anything to do with marriage after what you have been through. But I also know that if you were married to me, your husband would have no legal claim on you anymore. You would be protected. And I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, that I would never hurt you. I would never force you to do anything you did not want to do. We could have a marriage in name only if that is what you needed, just to keep you safe. Or it could be real if someday you thought you could feel something for me too. Kieran, wait, let me finish, he said, and she saw his hands were shaking. I am not a rich man. I have some savings, but not much. I can't offer you a fancy house or an easy life. But I can offer you honesty, respect, and a promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust. I would be honored beyond words if you would consider becoming my wife, Katherine Thorne. Will you marry me? The world seemed to stop spinning. Katherine stared at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness, who was offering her not just safety but his heart, and she felt something crack open inside her chest that she had thought sealed forever. I do not deserve this, she whispered. I do not deserve you. That is the fear and hurt talking, Kieran said gently. You deserve everything good in this world, and if you will let me, I would like to spend my life proving that to you. I am broken, Katherine said, the words tearing out of her. My marriage, what he did, it broke something in me. I do not know if I can be a proper wife to anyone. You are not broken, Kieran said fiercely. You are strong and brave and kind. You survived something terrible and you kept going. That is not broken, Katherine. That is extraordinary. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she realized she did believe him, at least about his intentions. And she knew with sudden crystalline clarity that she loved him too. Maybe it was too fast. Maybe it was born from desperation and gratitude, but it was real nonetheless. The thought of losing him, of running away again and never seeing his smile or hearing his voice, was unbearable. I love you too, she said, and watched his eyes widen with hope and disbelief. I've been afraid to admit it even to myself, but I do. I love you, Kieran, and I am terrified of what that means. It means you do not have to face anything alone anymore, he said. So what do you say? Will you marry me? Yes, Katherine breathed, and then louder with more certainty. Yes, I will marry you. Kieran's face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen, and before she could think better of it, Katherine stepped forward and kissed him. It was brief and chaste, but it was her choice, her desire, and that made all the difference. Kieran stood perfectly still, letting her control the kiss, and when she pulled back, his eyes were shining. "We should do this soon," he said, "before your husband finds out where you are. Tomorrow, if we can manage it." "Tomorrow," Katherine agreed, her head spinning. "But what about James? And the children?" "Let me talk to James. He will understand." James did more than understand. When Kieran explained the situation, leaving out none of the details about Katherine's past or the urgency of the marriage, James immediately offered to ride to Fairplay himself and arrange everything with the minister. He also offered to stand as witness and to host a small celebration afterward. "That girl has been through enough," James said firmly, "and I have known you long enough to trust you will do right by her. Besides, I have eyes. I have seen the way you two look at each other. This isn't just about keeping her safe, is it?" "No, sir," Kieran admitted. "I love her. I would marry her even if her husband wasn't looking for her." "Then you have my blessing and my support. Let's get this done." The next morning, Katherine wore the nicest dress she owned, a simple gray cotton that she had mended and pressed until it looked almost respectable. Emma insisted on weaving wildflowers into Katherine's hair, and Matthew stood guard outside her room as if protecting her from some unseen threat. They rode to Fairplay together, James and Kieran flanking Katherine like protective brothers, the children riding double with their father. The minister was a kind older man who asked no difficult questions and seemed genuinely happy to perform the ceremony. There were only 5 people in the small church, but Katherine did not care. She stood beside Kieran and repeated vows that felt more sacred than any she had spoken before, because this time they were true. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran took both her hands in his and said quietly, so only she could hear, "I will spend every day earning this gift you have given me." "We will earn it together," Katherine replied and kissed him again, less hesitant this time. They were emerging from the church, married less than 10 minutes when a voice cut through Katherine's happiness like a knife. "There you are, you ungrateful witch." Katherine froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. She turned slowly to see Marcus striding up the church steps, his handsome face twisted with rage. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and well-dressed, with dark hair and eyes that could shift from charming to cold in an instant. "You have led me on quite a chase," Marcus continued, his voice pleasant despite his words. "But it is time to stop this nonsense and come home." "I am not going anywhere with you," Katherine said, proud that her voice did not shake. "I am not your wife anymore. Do not be ridiculous." "Of course you are my wife. We were married in Denver 3 years ago, or have you forgotten that marriage is dissolved?" Kieran said, stepping slightly in front of Katherine. "She is my wife now, legally married not 10 minutes ago. You have no claim on her." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he looked Kieran up and down with obvious disdain. "Who is this cowboy nobody, Katherine? Your latest mistake. Did you really think marrying some dirt-poor ranch hand would solve anything?" "He is my husband," Katherine said, moving to stand beside Kieran and taking his hand. "And he is a better man than you could ever hope to be." "You were already married," Marcus snarled. "This sham does not count." "Actually, it does," the minister said mildly from the church doorway. "I just filed the paperwork myself. The marriage is legal and binding, and I heard this young woman state clearly that her previous marriage was dissolved. Unless you have evidence otherwise, sir, you need to move along. Dissolved. You cannot just dissolve a marriage because you feel like it, you stupid woman." "Do not speak to her that way," Kieran said, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus laughed, an ugly sound. "Or what? You will fight me. I am a respected businessman in Denver. You are a nobody." "I will have the law here so fast." "Please do," James interrupted, stepping forward with the children behind him. "I would love to hear you explain to the sheriff why you are harassing a newly married woman. And while we are at it, maybe we can discuss those bruises, Doctor." Williams documented when Katherine arrived in town, the ones on her arms and ribs that were definitely caused by a man's fists. "I am sure the law would be very interested in that." Katherine stared at James in surprise. She had not told him about the bruises, had not seen Dr. Williams. But James caught her eye and gave the slightest nod, and she understood. He was bluffing, protecting her the only way he could. Marcus's face flushed an ugly red. "You have no proof of anything. She probably got those bruises from falling down drunk." "My wife has always been clumsy and prone to hysteria." "I am not your wife," Katherine repeated. "And I was never clumsy or hysterical. You beat me, Marcus. You terrorized me for 3 years, and I finally found the courage to leave. I am not coming back, and there is nothing you can do about it." "We will see about that," Marcus spat. But he was backing down the steps now, clearly uncertain in the face of united opposition. "This isn't over, Katherine. I will make you regret humiliating me like this." "If you come near her again, you will regret it," Kieran said. "That is not a threat, it is a promise. Katherine is under my protection now, and I take that very seriously." Marcus glared at them all for a long moment, then turned and stalked away, his shoulders rigid with anger. Katherine watched him go, waiting for the fear to swamp her. But instead she felt something like relief, like a weight lifting. She was married to Kieran now. She had witnesses, legal documentation, and people willing to stand beside her. Marcus had no power over her anymore. "Is it really over?" she whispered. "It's really over," Kieran confirmed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You are safe now, I promise." They returned to the ranch that afternoon as husband and wife. And that night, after the children were in bed and James had tactfully made himself scarce, Katherine and Kieran stood in the small room that was now theirs and faced each other with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "I meant what I said," Kieran told her gently. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We can take this as slowly as you need." "I know," Katherine said, "and I love you for that. But Kieran, I am tired of letting fear control me. I am tired of letting what Marcus did define how I live my life. I want to move forward, and I want to do that with you." "Are you sure?" In answer, Katherine stepped close and kissed him, pouring all her hope and trust and love into the gesture. Kieran responded carefully at first, still letting her set the pace. But as Katherine's hands found their way to his shoulders and then into his hair, he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. They made love slowly that night, with a tenderness that brought tears to Katherine's eyes. Kieran was patient and gentle, checking in with her constantly, and when she finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt safer than she had in years. The next few months were the happiest of Katherine's life. She and Kieran settled into married life with surprising ease, finding rhythms that worked for both of them. Kieran continued his work on the ranch, but now he came home to Katherine every night, and they would talk about their days, make plans for the future, and slowly build a life together. The children adored Kieran and seemed thrilled that he and Katherine had married. Emma started calling Katherine Mama Kate without prompting, and while it made Katherine's heart ache for the mother Emma had lost, it also filled her with joy to be so loved. Matthew, always more reserved, began to open up more, talking to Kieran about his feelings and asking Katherine to help him write letters to his mother in heaven, which she did without judgment. In August, Katherine woke up feeling nauseous and immediately knew what it meant. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She wanted Kieran's child desperately, but the thought of childbirth, of the pain and danger involved, made her anxious. When she told Kieran that evening, his face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, joy, worry, and finally settling on determined protectiveness. "We will get through this together," he promised. "I will take care of you every step of the way." "I am frightened," Katherine admitted. "My mother died in childbirth with my younger brother." "What if—" "Do not think like that," Kieran said firmly, taking her hands. "You are strong and healthy, and we will get the best care possible. Dr. Williams in Fairplay is supposed to be excellent. I will make sure you have everything you need." True to his word, Kieran was attentive throughout the pregnancy, almost comically so. He insisted Katherine rest more, tried to take over some of her household duties despite being hopeless at cooking, and checked on her constantly. James was thrilled at the news, as were the children, and everyone on the ranch seemed to take a personal interest in making sure Katherine was comfortable and safe. Word eventually reached them that Marcus had returned to Denver and was telling people his wife had died during her travels. Katherine should have been angry at being declared dead, but instead she felt a sense of freedom. If Marcus wanted to pretend she no longer existed, that was fine by her. It made the severing of their past complete. Winter came early to the mountains that year, and by January, Katherine was heavily pregnant and increasingly uncomfortable. Dr. Williams had examined her in December and declared everything progressing normally, which eased some of her fears. But as her due date approached in late February, she found herself growing more anxious. The labor started on a cold night when the stars were brilliant in the clear sky. Kieran rode through the darkness to fetch Dr. Williams while James sat with Katherine, offering calm reassurance. Emma and Matthew had been sent to stay with one of the other ranch families for the night, and Katherine was grateful not to frighten them with her pain. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Katherine was certain she could not continue, when the pain was so intense she wanted to give up. But Kieran never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement and love, and somehow she found the strength to keep going. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their son was born. He came into the world squalling with indignation, perfect and healthy, with a shock of dark hair and his father's hazel eyes. Kieran wept openly as he held his son for the first time, and Katherine, exhausted and overwhelmed, felt a love so fierce it was almost painful. They named him Samuel, after Kieran's father, and called him Sam. He was a good baby, easy-tempered and healthy, and Katherine recovered from the birth quickly. Watching Kieran with Sam was one of her greatest joys. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing to Sam in the middle of the night and walking him around the house when he was fussy. Emma and Matthew were equally smitten with their new baby brother, as they had taken to calling Sam. They helped where they could and often just sat watching him with expressions of pure wonder. Spring came again, and with it, Katherine's first wedding anniversary with Kieran. It seemed impossible that only a year had passed since that desperate proposal and hurried wedding. So much had changed, and yet the core of what they had built remained the same: trust, respect, and a love that grew deeper every day. They celebrated quietly with just the family, and that night after everyone else was asleep, Kieran gave Katherine a gift. It was a small wooden box he had carved himself, and inside was a delicate silver locket. "Open it," he urged. Inside the locket was a tiny painting, clearly done by someone with more enthusiasm than skill. It showed Katherine, Kieran, and Sam, along with Emma and Matthew, all standing in front of the ranch house. "Emma painted it," Kieran explained. "She wanted you to have something to remember this year, our first year as a real family." Katherine closed her fingers around the locket, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. You are all perfect. I never thought I could be this happy." "You deserve all of this and more," Kieran said. "Every single day with you is a gift, Katherine. I love you more now than I did a year ago, and I will love you more with every year that passes." "I love you too," Katherine whispered. "You saved me, Kieran. You saw me when I was lost and believed I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Kieran corrected gently. "I just had the privilege of being there to see it." Life continued in its rhythms. Sam grew from an infant into a toddler, walking early and talking late, much to everyone's amusement. Katherine's relationship with Emma and Matthew deepened, and they began to call her Mama without any qualifier, which both honored her and made her determined to live up to the title. James met a widow in town, a kind woman named Helen who had lost her husband to a mining accident. The courtship was slow and respectful, but genuine, and when James asked Katherine and Kieran what they thought about him remarrying, they encouraged him wholeheartedly. James and Helen married in the spring of 1881, 3 years after Katherine had first arrived in Fairplay. The wedding was larger than Katherine's had been, with half the town in attendance, and Katherine stood beside Helen as a witness, grateful to see James happy again. With Helen taking over the main house's household duties, Katherine and Kieran began to talk seriously about building their own home on the ranch. James immediately offered them land on the eastern pasture, a beautiful spot with views of the mountains and the creek running nearby. They spent the summer of 1881 building, with help from the other ranch hands and even some men from town who had come to respect the Ashfords. It was a modest house, just 4 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with their own dreams. They moved in that September, and Katherine spent weeks making it perfect, sewing curtains, arranging furniture, creating a home for her family. Sam, now 2 years old, loved having his own room, even though he usually ended up crawling into his parents' bed by morning. In October, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news brought only joy. She knew what to expect, knew she could survive it, and Kieran was even more prepared to support her through it. Their daughter was born the following May, arriving quickly and easily compared to Sam's difficult birth. She had Katherine's dark hair and Kieran's smile, and they named her Rose, after the wild roses that bloomed along the creek each summer. With 2 young children and a household to manage, Katherine's days were full, but she had never been happier. She watched her children grow with wonder, marveling at their personalities and the way they navigated the world. Sam was serious and thoughtful, while Rose was adventurous and bold. Together, they kept Katherine and Kieran constantly busy and thoroughly entertained. Emma and Matthew, now teenagers, were frequent visitors, often coming to help with the younger children or just to talk. Matthew was showing an aptitude for ranch management and worked closely with his father and Kieran. Emma loved books and learning, and Katherine helped her study, harboring secret hopes that Emma might one day become a teacher. The years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Katherine learned to ride well enough to help with ranch work when needed. Kieran became James's unofficial second in command, respected by all the ranch hands and trusted completely. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, cattle prices that fluctuated wildly, and the slow but steady changes as Colorado moved from wild frontier to something more settled. Katherine sometimes thought about her old life in Denver, about her father and the husband who had declared her dead. She heard through occasional gossip that Marcus had remarried, a young woman with a large dowry, and she hoped desperately that he treated his new wife better than he had treated her. As for her father, she had no desire to reconnect, and as far as she knew, he had no idea where she was or what had become of her. That past life felt like a different person's story now. Katherine Ashford, wife and mother, bore little resemblance to the frightened young woman who had stumbled off the stagecoach in Fairplay all those years ago. She had found her worth, not because Kieran had told her she was priceless, though he did so frequently, but because she had learned to see it in herself. One evening in the summer of 1886, 8 years after their first meeting, Katherine and Kieran sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset. Sam and Rose were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Inside, Katherine knew, there was laundry to be done and dishes to be washed and 100 other tasks waiting. But for now, she was content to simply be, with her hand in Kieran's and her children safe and happy. "You ever regret it?" Kieran asked suddenly. "Marrying me so quickly, giving up any chance of a different life?" Katherine turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes even after all these years. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me back my life, Kieran. You gave me a home and a family and showed me what love is supposed to look like. How could I ever regret that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," he said, "that you do not feel trapped or like you settled." "I am happier than I ever imagined possible," Katherine assured him. "And I did not settle. I found exactly what I needed, even when I did not know what that was. You saw me when I felt invisible. You treated me with value when the whole town called me worthless. You made me believe I deserved good things. I love you, Kieran Ashford, more than words can express." Kieran pulled her close and kissed her temple. "I love you too. Always have from that first moment, always will until my last breath." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the mountains turned purple in the fading light. Katherine thought about all the choices that had led her to this moment, the pain and fear that had driven her to Fairplay, the courage it had taken to accept Kieran's help and eventually his love. She thought about the proposal that had seemed so desperate and sudden at the time, but had turned out to be the best decision of her life. She thought about the town that had called her worthless and how wrong they had been. She thought about the lonely cowboy who had seen something in her worth saving and had loved her completely ever since. As if reading her thoughts, Kieran said, "Best decision I ever made, talking to you that day." "Best decision I ever made, saying yes when you proposed," Katherine replied. "Even though I proposed the same day we met, especially because of that," Katherine said with a smile. "It was crazy and impulsive and completely unlike either of us, but it was also brave and true. You knew what you wanted and you were not afraid to ask for it. That took courage." "I was terrified," Kieran admitted. "I thought you would think I was crazy or taking advantage, but I also knew that if I let you walk away, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Sometimes you just know, you know." "I do know," Katherine agreed. "I knew it too, even if I was too scared to fully admit it at the time. My heart knew you were someone special, someone safe, someone I could trust, and it was right." Sam came running up to the porch then, interrupting their conversation. "Papa, Rose says she can climb higher than me." "Tell her she cannot." "I can so," Rose protested, right on her brother's heels. "How about neither of you climb anything right now?" Kieran suggested diplomatically. "It's getting dark, and I think Mama might have some cookies in the kitchen if you ask nicely." Both children immediately forgot their argument and raced inside, shouting about cookies. Katherine laughed and stood to follow them, but Kieran caught her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For trusting me. For building this life with me." for giving me a family and a purpose and a reason to be better every day, for being you. Katherine leaned down and kissed him softly. Thank you for finding me when I was lost, for seeing value in me when I could not see it in myself, for loving me so completely that I learned to love myself again, for being the man I did not know I was waiting for. They went inside together to find their children covered in cookie crumbs, and James and Helen had stopped by for a visit, bringing Emma and Matthew with them. The house was suddenly full of people and noise and laughter, the kind of beautiful chaos that Katherine had once thought impossible. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Katherine stood in the doorway of her home and looked out at the valley spread before her. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the landscape. In the distance, she could see the lights of Fairplay, the town that had once rejected her but that she now thought of as home. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the pain and struggle that had seemed unbearable at the time but had ultimately led her to exactly where she needed to be. She thought about the woman she had been and the woman she had become, and she was proud of the transformation. Kieran came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had been lost and alone but had found each other against all odds. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked finally. "How far we have come," Katherine said. "How different everything is from what I expected. How grateful I am for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here." "Any regrets?" "None," Katherine said firmly. "Not a single one. This life with you, with our children, is everything I ever wanted, even when I thought I did not deserve to want anything." "You deserve the world," Kieran murmured against her ear, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." Katherine turned in his arms and looked up at him, this man who had changed her life with his kindness and his courage. "You already have," she said. "You gave me a home, a family, love, and most importantly, you gave me back to myself. What more could I possibly need?" They kissed under the moonlight, two souls who had found each other in the unlikeliest of circumstances and built something beautiful together. And as they finally went inside to their warm bed and their sleeping children, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to unfold with their mix of joys and challenges. Sam grew into a young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's determination, eventually deciding he wanted to study law, of all things. Kieran and Katherine saved every penny they could to send him to school in Denver, proud beyond measure of their son's ambitions. Rose, true to her adventurous spirit, became an excellent horsewoman and declared her intention to run her own ranch someday. She had her father's way with animals and her mother's head for business, a combination that served her well. In 1890, when Katherine was 35 and thought her childbearing years were behind her, she discovered she was pregnant again. The news shocked everyone, including Katherine herself, but this time there was no fear, only acceptance and a little amusement at life's surprises. Their third child, a boy they named Thomas after Kieran's grandfather, was born that winter during a snowstorm that trapped them all inside for 3 days. He was a happy, easy baby who seemed to bring light wherever he went, and his older siblings doted on him completely. James and Helen had children of their own by then, 2 boys who were close in age to Thomas, and the ranch felt like it was overflowing with family and life. The Patterson Ranch had grown and prospered over the years, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area, and Kieran had become a full partner in the business. Katherine sometimes helped Helen with the main house when needed, but mostly she focused on her own family and on the quiet volunteer work she had started doing with women in difficult situations. When women arrived in Fairplay running from bad marriages or desperate circumstances, Katherine was often the first person they were directed to, and she helped however she could, offering shelter, advice, or simply understanding from someone who had been there. It became her quiet mission, helping other women find their own worth the way Kieran had helped her find hers. She never spoke about it publicly, never sought recognition, but the women she helped knew, and they passed the word along, creating an informal network of support. Kieran supported her work completely, sometimes riding to Fairplay himself to escort frightened women back to the ranch where they could rest and plan their next steps. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, how important it was to Katherine to pay forward the kindness that had saved her life. Emma did become a teacher, just as Katherine had hoped, opening a school in Fairplay and teaching children of all backgrounds. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch management as James aged, proving himself as capable as his father. Both of them remained close to Kieran and Katherine, still considering them family in the truest sense of the word. In the summer of 1895, nearly 17 years after Katherine first arrived in Fairplay, the town decided to celebrate Colorado's statehood with a festival. There would be music and dancing, food and games, and everyone was invited. Katherine, now 40 years old, stood in front of the mirror trying to decide what to wear. She had filled out some over the years, bearing 3 children and living a life of relative comfort, and there were strands of silver beginning to show in her dark hair. But when she looked at herself, she did not see the frightened, broken woman who had once fled Denver. She saw a woman who was loved and valued, who had built a good life and a family, who had found her purpose and her place. "You look beautiful," Kieran said from the doorway, and Katherine turned to see her husband watching her with the same expression he had worn on their wedding day. He was 43 now, with more gray in his hair and lines around his eyes from years of working in the sun, but to Katherine, he was as handsome as ever. "We are getting old," Katherine said with a smile. "We are getting better," Kieran corrected, coming to wrap his arms around her. "Like good whiskey or fine wine." Katherine laughed and leaned into his embrace. "I love you, you know. After all these years, I love you more than I did in the beginning." "I know," Kieran said. "I feel the same way. Falling in love with you has been the adventure of my lifetime, and I wouldn't change a single moment." They went to the festival as a family, all 5 of them piling into the wagon for the ride to town. Sam was home from university for the summer, full of stories about his studies. Rose, now 13, was more interested in the horses that would be at the festival than any of the other activities. Thomas, at 5 years old, was excited about everything and could not stop bouncing in his seat. The town square was decorated with bunting and flags, and there was already music playing when they arrived. Katherine saw familiar faces everywhere, people she had come to know over the years, people who respected her now, even if they had once judged her harshly. They spent the afternoon enjoying the festivities, eating too much food, watching the children play games, and catching up with friends and neighbors. At one point, Katherine found herself standing with a group of other ranch wives, all of them watching their husbands compete in some ridiculous contest involving roping fence posts. "Your Kieran is still the handsomest man in the county," one of the women said with a friendly elbow to Katherine's ribs. "And the best," Katherine agreed without embarrassment. "I am the luckiest woman in the world. You two have always been so devoted to each other," another woman commented. "It's nice to see, especially these days when marriages seem to be more about convenience than love. We had our share of hardship at the start," Katherine said carefully, "but we built something strong together. That's what matters." As the sun began to set, the musicians started playing waltzes, and couples moved onto the makeshift dance floor in the square. Kieran appeared at Catherine's side and offered his hand with a formal little bow that made her giggle. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Ashford?" "You may, Mr. Ashford." They moved onto the floor together, and Kieran swept her into the dance with the same careful grace he brought to everything he did with her. Katherine let herself relax into the familiar rhythm, her body knowing exactly how to move with his after so many years together. "I was just thinking," Kieran said as they turned, "about that day I first saw you. You looked so lost and so determined at the same time. I couldn't stop thinking about you." "I was terrified," Katherine admitted. "I thought my life was over, that I had made too many mistakes to ever recover from. And now I know my life had just begun," Katherine said. "Everything before was just preparation for this, for us, for the life we built together." "The town called you worthless," Kieran said, echoing the words he had said so many years ago. "But I saw priceless. I still do. Every day you are priceless to me." "And you are priceless to me," Katherine replied. "You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me everything that matters." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by their family and their community. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that had stood the test of time. When the music finally ended and they gathered their sleepy children to head home, Katherine took one last look at the town that had once rejected her, but had become her home. Fairplay, Colorado, nestled in its high mountain valley, had been the setting for her transformation. It was where she had arrived broken and left whole, where she had found love and family and purpose. It was where she had learned that her worth was not determined by what others thought of her, but by what she knew to be true about herself. As they drove home under a canopy of stars, Thomas asleep in her lap and Kieran's hand warm in hers, Katherine felt a profound sense of peace. She had everything she needed, everything that mattered. She had love and family, purpose and belonging. She had a partner who saw her truly and loved her completely. She had children who were growing into good people. She had a home and a community and a life worth living. The journey from that desperate day in 1878 to this moment had been long and sometimes difficult, but Katherine would not change any of it. Every struggle had taught her something. Every hardship had made her stronger. Every moment of pain had made the joy that much sweeter. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How perfect this moment is," Katherine said. "How grateful I am for all of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts," Katherine confirmed, "because they led me here to you, to this life. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Kieran raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Neither would I. You are my greatest blessing, Katherine Ashford, today, tomorrow, and always." They arrived home to find their house bathed in moonlight, looking like something from a dream. Kieran carried Thomas inside while Katherine helped the older children get ready for bed. Once everyone was settled, she and Kieran stood together on their porch, looking out at the land they had made their own. "You remember what you said to me that first night after you proposed?" Katherine asked. "I said a lot of things that night," Kieran replied with a smile. "Which part specifically?" "You said you couldn't offer me a fancy house or an easy life, but you could offer me honesty, respect, and the promise that you would spend every day trying to be worthy of my trust." "I remember," Kieran said softly. "You have kept that promise," Katherine told him, her voice thick with emotion. "Every single day for 17 years you have kept it. You have been honest and respectful and so much more than worthy of my trust. You have been my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. You have been everything I needed and so much I didn't even know to want." "Katherine, no, let me finish," she said, placing her fingers gently over his lips. "I need you to know that marrying you, saying yes to that crazy proposal on the same day we met, was the best decision I ever made. You did not just save my life, Kieran. You gave me a reason to live it. You showed me what love is supposed to be. You made me a mother, a wife, a woman who knows her worth, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for all of it, for all of you." Kieran pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Katherine could feel his heart beating against her cheek, strong and steady, just like the man himself. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "From that first moment to this one, to whatever comes next, I love you. And I love you," Katherine replied, "always and forever." They stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light. Behind them, their house was full of sleeping children, evidence of the love they shared. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, witnesses to all they had overcome and all they had built. The years would continue to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows as all lives do. There would be grandchildren eventually, and the bittersweet pain of watching their children leave to build lives of their own. There would be losses and challenges, celebrations and quiet moments of grace. But through it all, Katherine and Kieran would face everything together, their bond only growing stronger with each passing year. They would grow old side by side, holding hands on the porch and watching sunsets, telling stories to grandchildren about how they met and fell in love in the wild days of the Colorado frontier. And when Katherine was very old, surrounded by children and grandchildren in the house she and Kieran had built together, she would still remember that day in Fairplay when she had nothing and no one. She would remember the lonely cowboy who had seen something in her worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. She would remember saying yes to his impossible proposal and how that single word had changed everything. But that was still far in the future. For now, Katherine Ashford was 40 years old, standing on her porch with her husband's arms around her, her children safe in their beds, and her heart full of love and gratitude. She had everything that mattered, everything she had ever wanted, and it was more than enough. It was everything. The story of how the town called her worthless, but the lonely cowboy saw priceless, would be told and retold in the family for generations. It would become the foundation story, the reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes taking a chance on someone, or letting someone take a chance on you, can change everything. But more than that, it was a reminder that worth is not determined by circumstance or other people's opinions. Katherine had always been priceless, even when she could not see it herself. It just took the right person, at the right time, with the courage to see clearly and speak truthfully, to help her recognize what had always been true. And as Katherine finally went inside to her warm bed and her loving husband, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the courage to keep going when everything seemed hopeless, and for the man who had loved her when she needed it most, and continued to love her still. The town had called her worthless. The lonely cowboy had seen priceless. And together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love and family, and the simple truth that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved for who they truly are. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living. And Katherine Ashford, formerly Katherine Thorne, formerly a frightened woman with no options and no hope, had found her happily ever after in the mountains of Colorado with a cowboy who had taken a chance, and a town that had eventually learned to accept what it had once rejected. The end of one story, but really, just the continuation of a love that would endure for all their days, growing richer and deeper with each passing year, a testament to the power of seeing someone truly and loving them completely.